I've never felt so broken as a person in my life. Whatever I was doing then, it was just futile.
Using my own circumstances, the harm, the bad crap in addiction, to now help someone and lift them out of that addiction, I think it's remarkable.
Welcome to Recover the Valley podcast by Sanctuary Recovery Centers. The voices are yours, the stories are yours. Through shared experience, shared hope and community, we focus on true healing from addiction. True stories, true community, truly you.
Welcome, everybody, to Recover the Valley podcast. I'm so excited to be here. This is our introductory podcast, and my name is Kyle Cummings, and I am your host this evening. I'm excited because we're bringing this platform out, and we're trying to reach people all over the valley and all over the nation. And what our mission is here is to give some encouragement to those who might be suffering from the disease of alcoholism and addiction. And so one thing that I kind of wanted to do on this particular episode is I wanted to talk about the destination. Well, the destination is always the same. We're all trying to free ourselves from being under the lash of our addiction or being a slave to our addiction and the state that it gets us into. So that's the destination we're seeking, but where it differs in how we get there, right? So the difference is in the details, and that's what I'm kind of like dubbing this episode particularly, is the differences in the details. And what a joy. I have a friend of mine here by the name of Klein, and I'm excited to have him as my first guest, and he's going to tell us a little bit about the story that brought him to the destination where he's at, and give us some detail on how he did it, and you listeners out there can hopefully gain some insight on how it can be done, and see where you relate to a journey that could get you to that ending destination of no longer suffering, because we don't want anyone to suffer from drugs and alcohol. I'm fortunate that I don't anymore. And so, Chris, where did we meet?
We met at Florence West Prison Yard.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
And
actually, it's kind of a funny story. I was not at Florence West. I was in Kingman, and I was in a 12-step recovery group, and I knew I was going to go to Florence. And someone in that group told me to look for a guy named Kyle. He's a goofy guy. He actually, what's the comedian's name? He compared you to the little short one.
I can't remember.
I don't know. Anyways, but he was like, look for this guy and give him a hug for me.
Yeah.
And so it kind of plugged me into recovery right when I got in Florence West. And then I met him, gave him a hug. And then he became my sponsor, and so we worked the steps together.
Yeah.
When we were in prison, and we would talk about moments like this, and
yeah,
it's a cool thing.
That was really interesting for me to hear that someone at another facility had encouraged you to find this man here at this facility, give him a hug, and let him know Chicago was the man's name, had sent you, and so, like, I had this, like, somehow I had formed a legacy of some kind of being helpful, which by no means was, like...
Easy ego.
Yeah, it's just remarkable, and from then on, our friendship blossomed, and I was able to help you, and I think you helped me even more than maybe I helped you. But getting back on track, I want you to kind of just tell us a little bit about your story and what you were like in your addiction and your using and your alcoholism, and what was the turning point to help want to change that, what you did, and tell us a little bit about yourself now. I mean, you looked pretty well put together. I would agree. And so let's dive right in, brother. Let's hear it.
Cool. I think that I'm not unique. My story is very similar. The feelings are very similar to what most people describe active addiction or like childhood to be. I didn't feel a part of. I had family issues at home. My parents got divorced. I had trouble dealing with emotions. I was always looking for ways to escape. And those that didn't really manifest itself in addiction right away, but it manifested itself in what I think is a spiritual malady right away. And so
if you don't mind me interrupting, what were like other ways before drugs and alcohol that you like would escape? Did you have?
Yeah. So, home life was really hard for me. It was real strict. And so when I got to school, it was hard for me to have like strict discipline at school because it was my escape.
Okay.
And so I was always looking for something to escape. And so I cared a lot about like what other people thought of me. I wanted to be cool. I wanted to be liked. I wanted whatever like would make me feel good at the time. And so that really became like me escaping at school and then having to come back and lie to my parents about what happened and creating like this perpetual ball of shame. And that shame, I think, is what really fueled the totality of my addiction. And it really culminated in like the day I decided to sit down and get honest with someone about some of that stuff, all of that stuff, was the day that you know, I started to get some relief. And it didn't necessarily come that day, but, you know, opening my mouth and being vocal allowed my shame to become like my greatest gift and has allowed me to really work with guys, and guys can relate, and then they come to you. And so like, you know, what kept me out there ultimately is what keeps me in here. So that's kind of, I mean...
So would you say that
I would steal. I would look at porn. You know, like.
So would you say like your liability then could be like almost one of your greatest assets today?
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not like a could be thing. It's the work, you know, like you commit to doing the work on a daily basis. It's an everyday decision. It's not like I make this decision today and then somehow I'm good tomorrow. Like there's no amount of work I can do today that guarantees tomorrow.
Right.
And so, like I had to stay willing to open my mouth and talk about these things and be vulnerable and open up and give my hand out. But it's no longer a liability, man. And you were a big part of that. Like it's a gift. And ironically, I found that gift in a place where, you know, being vulnerable and open isn't really accepted. It was the prison yard.
Yeah.
But if you really like dig a little
deeper,
deeper,
you gotta be tough in prison, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's a group of guys in there that like everyone just wants to change, but everyone also wants to be liked at the same time. And at some point in time, you got to make a decision to act one way or the other. But as long as I'm acting kind of in the middle of those two things, I'm not making any progress. So
paint me this picture of, because I know it wasn't all rainbows and butterflies before you went to prison. So give us a little detail with as much as you're comfortable sharing to help the listeners relate, because I'm sure there's people out there listening right now who are suffering and are in a state where you once were. And let's maybe give them a little picture of that.
Okay. So my addiction really started, 18, started doing Oxycontin.
Yeah.
Got into the party scene for a while, had fun. I think that was kind of the glue in the beginning that kept me there.
Yeah.
But also fueled this habit of like utilizing something outside of myself to make my insides feel better. And so went into the party scene, ecstasy, raves, acid, drinking. But an underlying factor of my addiction was I was a useless addict. Like there's some people out there with hustle. I had none. So like I was just so upset with myself when I was using that, like I just give up entirely on life.
Yeah.
And so I'd find myself in situations where I was having to take actions that really didn't align with who I was to get what I needed. And drugs and alcohol were what I needed. And those decisions that I made to get drugs and alcohol are things that separated me from society in my head.
Okay.
And so that, equated to 3 prison sentences, multiple institutions. I went to a boarding school when I was 15. It was a 12-step based boarding school for 2.5 years. It was an equine based ranch, which was actually a gift. because the staff there were really involved in their recoveries. And I saw what a good representation of recovery looked like. And so it gave me hope on the back end.
So they were able to like paint a picture of what
I was always like, there was always a part of me that was like, I have a safe place to go where, you know, guys who have experienced great pains have become very successful, whatever that looks like. And so AA or any 12-step fellowship never really looked that bad to me. Like, I knew it was a good place to do good things, to be around good people, and to change my life.
And this was developed before you even had like a serious drug or alcohol problem.
This was before I'd ever drank or drugged. I was the only one there at that boarding school that had never used.
That's interesting. So you almost knew the solution before to anyone, because you were witnessing it there with some of the guys you were with. It was working for them, and you didn't even have a problem. And you're like, well, at least I know that this works even before you had any affliction of drugs and alcohol at the time. Although you were suffered from other things, you know, you said like insecurities and those sorts of things. So please continue.
I still had to go work a first step.
Oh, did you? Yeah. All right.
Yeah. So I mean, that's what the addiction looked like. Like I'm real good at self-propulsion. Like, I can experience bad consequences, and then I can, you know, light a fire under my ass and get some good things really fast. But what I never knew or realized I needed to do was to develop habits to keep those things.
Okay. So you could rally, but then it would just hit a point and then not go anywhere.
Yeah, and I would just throw it all away. I did that so many times, and then after I did that so many times, I would just, the shame of throwing these good opportunities away, letting everybody down again in my life, that I would just run away.
Do you think that would fuel you to go back out, is when you just, the repetitiveness of building up and then not going where you want, and then shame and guilt comes in that leads you back out?
It's a cycle.
Yeah.
It's all it is a cycle. I believe you are your habits.
Yeah.
And so every day I try and cultivate these habits.
So when do you think was, when do you think like a turning point was? Like, obviously you talked about prison sentences, and when did you like really have that idea? I'm sure you probably had those times before in your life. You're like, I'm done. This is it. And probably like truly meant it at the bottom of your heart.
Yeah.
But when was like, you think that moment where you just were like, first, like, obviously it was a turning point because you're doing really well now, but when was that? Can you explain that time and that moment for us?
It was probably the 6-month stretch before my last prison sentence. It was, fentanyl and homelessness.
Oh, wow.
And then being in a really just sick relationship. I've never felt so broken as a person in my life, and so useless. And that any self-confidence that I had that I could, do this on my own was just smashed. I was useless. Like, I felt like something inside me broke, like that last necessary thing that needed to break to where I could like just sit down and adopt a new lifestyle, because whatever I was doing then, it was just futile. Like I can't, there's some things in life that words can't express.
Yeah. The
best things and probably the worst things. And I don't have words, but I have feelings for that. And I still there's still like an innate disgust for the person I became during that time. And
well, you described it wonderfully, because in that description, like it's making me reflect of when the moments before I had that turning point, and I feel it, and I'm sure our viewers are as well. So thank you.
Yeah. So, but there is hope. Like, that there's that, all that cliche, it's always darkest before the dawn, like all pictures develop in the dark, all beautiful pictures, that type of stuff. But it's true. But in order to accomplish something like that, you got to do something new. And in order to do something new, then you got to listen to someone else. And I think everyone gets, and for me, for a long time, I got lost in trying to outthink this thing, or thinking I knew what was best for my own recovery. And I just like, there's a great quote that I like is beat into a state of reasonableness.
Amen. Yeah.
And like my reasonableness was like, okay, I'm going to make you guys my friends. I'm going to do the steps, and I'm going to be of service.
Yeah.
Trust God, clean house, and help others.
Yeah. So that's what you did. You picked up a fellowship and you got to work. Was it in prison? Was it?
Yeah, it was. It started in Kingman, a group of guys. We were going to 12-step meetings, and there was no one there sponsoring, and so we decided to sponsor each other. And so we got through step 5, and then I got shipped to Florence, and then I met you, and I picked it back up, and we started from step 1 and went through step 12.
Yeah,
and
that's great. And
yeah,
I remember too. I was towards the end of my prison sentence at that time, and I was fortunate to sponsor so many men while I was there, and some made it, some didn't, and I was kind of like I want to say phoning it in my last bit, but I was like, I've done my work here. I'm kind of just going to float my last few months, and of course I'll be of service at the fellowship that we had there, but I wasn't trying to pick up sponsees, and then you came in, and it was just a wonderful way to like cap it, because you were so willing, which is essential. You'd reach that point of just like, I'll take direction, I'll listen, because like you said before, trying to do it your way hadn't worked, and you were willing to adopt ideas of from other men that it had worked, or a path they had found, and it was a really great experience. And so I'd like to hear. So what's your life like now, though? What are the benefits of this work? And because I know it wasn't an easy process. We could go on and on talking about like the work it takes to get to the state where he's at, but ultimately, you cliff noted up, you had to do it, and you had to be pushed into that state of reasonableness, right?
Yeah.
But I'd like to hear about like how your life is today, and give some of us hope on, because you were like that and you're like this now. What does like this look like?
It's interesting. I don't want to say what like the first thing that hit my brain was, and it's like reading a book, man.
Yeah.
Like the book I was reading before was the same story over and over again. Like I'm flipping pages now. And so I'm finding new things every day, and everything's growing, and I have this like this framework for living that's producing great results in my life, and I'm finding that everything I think I need ends up being something I don't need, and I get something else, and it is way better. But there's it all is projected from one decision, and that decision is it's to operate from first principles. It's to utilize things, not utilize things outside of myself to make myself feel better, but project from the inside out. And to do that, I believe the work that I've done on the inside has manifested like this fucking fabulous life. And it's like,
well, what does fabulous look like?
I know, man.
Don't sugarcoat it for me. Tell me. It's perspective, it's
the last two. So check this out. Yesterday for dinner, I made mahi and fried rice. The day before that, I had ribeye steaks over arugula. I went to Fleming's for my 2-year anniversary.
Oh, awesome.
Groups of guys hang out with me, and we're there for each other. I'm a useful member of my family, with my friends. I work in recovery. I'm happy. I'm fucking happy.
Yeah.
And it's simple. I don't need all this extra stuff. I love life today. I've got a chipping green in my backyard, and I just go chip for hours. I worked out in my backyard the other day and jumped in the pool. I've met a girl that I love. Yeah. And it's just a testament to the work, man. Like, I can't emphasize that enough. Like, I think that for so long I tried to like actor scenario myself into this stuff, like manipulate and willpower. But the minute I started being like, okay, what are these principles associated with these steps and how can I act from those? Yeah. The best things started happening. So,
and I want to, you continue to be an inspiration. One thing I've discovered from working a 12-step program is getting to witness someone else rise out of that muck and rise to a new level and continue to carry that on for others. I've got to witness you sponsor other men too. And I know that was a huge turning point in my recovery, was to be able to, like we touched on in the beginning, of using my own circumstances, the harm, the bad crap in addiction, to now help someone and lift them out of that addiction. I think it's remarkable, and I see what you do and the work you do, and it's amazing. And I'd like you, for our viewers, to, if there's someone watching right now that's still out there suffering, or maybe a family member that's watching and their son or daughter or cousin or even a friend is watching them, what would be something that you would want them to know and encourage them? Like, what would be that thing?
I would say learn how to love the parts of yourself that need love the most. Don't run from those things. I think oftentimes in my past, I worked the other way around. And the minute I started really checking into the parts, the dark parts, everything else kind of illuminated. And so that fifth step that nobody wants to do it. And then share it. Yeah. I mean, there's so much. Like, there's so much fun stuff you can do in recovery. Like, it's not all just like, it's, like, do all types of different exercise stuff and eating stuff. And
well, I'm taken back right now because I'm thinking, it's ironic because I went to that same restaurant, Fleming's. I took the girl that I'm with, which is also too a remarkable thing, to be in a healthy relationship. You touched on that in the beginning. That's I'd never been in a healthy relationship in my life. And, but I'm taking back because I'm like, man, we've ate at, these high end restaurants. You're making mahi and before, when you and I would have lunch, it'd be, easy make refried beans, some chicharrones, and a summer sausage, microwaved.
Cactus Annie squeeze cheese?
Yeah, Cactus Annie. Yeah. If we don't got the cheese, you can't.
We did have that ice cream fundraiser that one day.
That was that one time. Yeah, so it's the little things, but it's it's just remarkable to see how, where you can come from. I always like to say, and Chris and I aren't special. There wasn't like a particular set of awesome circumstances that happened to us that made it easier, or, like we got good breaks, in life even when we were down and out. No, like Chris and I are simply just examples of what happens when you rigorously work a program to all your might. Chris and I didn't half-ass it. We reached that point where we were like, we'll do whatever it takes. And I know that for a lot of people, hitting that point is different. And if you're watching this now, now can be that point if you're suffering. And know that there's so many resources out there and available to you. But Chris, I can't thank you enough. This is just like surreal for me, not only to be a part of a podcast that reaches others, because we've had the benefit of helping so many people locally, but now we can maybe stretch this a little further, and for you to share some of your story is awesome. And I can't tell you what a pleasure it is to have you on here.
I love you, man.
I love you too, man. That was another thing I think you left out on things you have in your life, is you're loved, brother. And being conscious of that was a big thing for me too. I knew I was loved. I I knew I was loved before, but I didn't really know it. And today I wake up every morning, I know that I'm loved by not only my family and friends and coworkers, associates, but I have a higher power that's working in my life too. That's pretty amazing. And so this is awesome. This is so great.
Yeah, you said something earlier about, you're not special. There's no breaks. The break exists in the perspective.
Right.
Like, it can be a break or it cannot be a break. It's just how you think about it. So
I like that. Well, I want to thank all of you for watching today. It's been truly a pleasure. Our first flagship podcast. I want to thank my guest again, Chris, and your host, Kyle, here. And again, if any of you need help, seek help, want help, please reach out. Use links associated with this podcast, and it's out there, and we can help you. So you all have a wonderful evening, and know that together we can recover the valley.